and Peter's already spoken to this, I'm not sure we need to say a lot more about it, is the issue of whether if we should divest from certain companies that we, quote, lose our seat at the table, and to act by shareholder resolution and so on. But Peter's already voiced one point of view about that. Is there anything more to be said?
I'm reaching for this mic an awful lot. One thing to keep in mind about the seat at the table argument is that those seats cost $2,000 a piece. That's all. If you hold $2,000 worth of shares of a company for at least 12 months, you can file a shareholder action. Basically, when the Board of Pensions divested from Motorola, Hewlett-Packard, and Caterpillar, they divested $2,000 in each company, which was the stock that they held that MRTI used to file their shareholder actions with those companies. So they had a very, very small holding compared to the $12 million that's in the commingled accounts that Robert mentioned earlier. So the divestment overture this time around makes specific provisions for allowing MRTI or the Board of Pensions or the Foundation to retain enough shares in a company to be able to continue to file shareholder actions on those issues where they will make a difference, like human rights, like wages, like working conditions. Those things are things that shareholder actions can deal with. However, shareholder action cannot change a company's basic business plan. If your business is to extract fossil fuels, shareholder action cannot address that by law. The SEC allows companies to reject any shareholder resolution that directly impacts the business model of the company. And that includes executive compensation, which is one of the issues that MRTI has tried to get on the table. The fossil fuel companies have basically said, you can't touch our executive compensation because we compensate our executives for the size of our fossil reserve. So they get bonus points for increasing the size of the reserve, which flies directly in the face of the carbon bubble that Peter mentioned earlier. So yes, a seat at the table can be maintained at a very, very reasonable price, and in some cases it's useful. It's not useful in getting fossil fuel companies to stop producing fossil fuels.
I think it's difficult to get your story on the front page of the New York Times saying you divested and then show up at the shareholder meeting next and say, we divested everything except our $2,000, so here we are.
What about the $12 million that we still hold in Caterpillar?
Like I said, the foundation does not hold anything in Caterpillar, so.
The Board of Pensions does.
I can't speak for the board.
Not a commingled, right?
I'm sorry?
You said that you have directly divested, but that the commingled still has it, right?
At the foundation, we have sold all of our directly held, and we have asked our managers to sell it from our commingled if it shows up in that 1% that we have. And that 1% could include some of those three companies, but I don't know. Okay. I don't have the list in front of me, so I can't look and see if that was in one of the commingled vehicles that we still have. We have tried to sell all of the shares that we have in those three.
What did Yoda say?
Speak up.
What did Yoda say?
Try, there is no try, do or do not. Yes.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, we're not the Jedi religion, we're the... So, I'd like to say something that I think relates to this, but also relates to what Heath said just before we took the break, which is about the controversy that comes with divestment. Back in 2012, when the main divestment issue in front of the Assembly was the Israel-Palestine question and the three companies, and at that Assembly they voted not to divest. They said, look for positive ways to invest positively, things that you could do in the region that would help create conditions for peace. And the foundation took that seriously, and we went and we invested more than $1 million in projects in the West Bank that we thought could help create conditions for peace. One of those was a solar energy field in Jericho that we built in partnership with the Arab Development Society. And it's been an incredibly successful investment. They contacted us last week and said they're ahead of their projections and they wanted to pay it back early. Would that be okay? And we said, sure. So that's going well. But we took the same question when, after the 2014 Assembly considered the fossil fuel overture and referred it to the Mission Responsibility Through Investment Committee for more study. And we said, what are the things that we could do with our investments in a positive way that the whole church could get behind, that could have an impact in this area? We came up with 5 things. And with your indulgence, I'd like to tell you what those are, because I think that they are some that could be considered positive, faithful alternatives to divestment that still leverage our investments. The first is we set aside, our trustees set aside an allocation of at least 1% of our assets towards investment in companies that are targeting climate change solutions. So that's $7 million that we've invested already, and it could grow larger in companies that are targeting climate change solutions. Second, we sent letters to all of our investment managers asking them to consider environmental factors when they choose stocks in which to invest. And we've heard good responses from a number of them on ways that they are doing that. The third is that we will continue to work with the Mission Responsibility Through Investment Committee to engage companies that are fossil fuel companies. Dan talked about shareholder actions as one way of doing that. That's one way we do that. Voting our proxies is one way we do that. But we actually sit down in the boardrooms with some of these companies to talk with them about their practices. And we do that along with a number of other faith-based institutions, institutional investors, a lot of the other denominational groups and Roman Catholic groups. We get together and we divvy up the companies so that we are going not just with our shares, but with the whole group's shares, and that we can cover more of them that way. So we'll continue to do that kind of engagement. Another one that I think is particularly exciting is the foundation holds the church loan funds. And these are funds that were given to the denomination over years to help build and develop congregational buildings. These are administered or loaned out by the Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program. And we got together with the folks at the Investment and Loan Program and said, what if we could use some of these for green loans, for helping congregations to make changes to their structures that would reduce their consumption of fossil fuels? So we've created a program, they call it the Restoring Creation Loans, that can be for anything from adding solar panels to the roofs of your buildings, to changing out your windows and lighting systems for more energy efficient systems, changing out your old boiler for a energy efficient HVAC system or a geothermal system, but things that could make an immediate sustainable reduction in the amount of fossil fuels consumed by a church. My dream, my fantasy is that solar panels on Presbyterian churches would be as ubiquitous and as recognizable as red doors on Episcopal churches. And that's something that people see again and again and again and again. We divest, we get our story the one time, and then we're off the list, we're done. But there are things that we can do that have a visible witness in our communities, that we are using some of the funds that we hold to make that happen for churches. And we've got millions of dollars set aside and available for congregations to borrow to make those changes. And we did them at terms that are hopefully friendly enough, low interest and long payback terms, so that the loans can be repaid out of the energy savings. So we think that's a really exciting program. And then the fifth thing that we've done is through our trust company. The foundation owns a national trust bank called the New Covenant Trust Company for churches and institutions that want to divest, that want to have their own funds be invested in a way that is fossil free. We've created mission-driven investment portfolios that can do that. So for churches who want to voluntarily take that step instead of being compelled to by the assembly, we make that available. So those are ways that we have come up with that our investments can be leveraged positively to address this issue directly and hopefully in ways that will have a more immediate impact than we think divestment would have.